Okay, I think we are up live on Facebook right now. We got just a few more minutes before we'll actually kick off with our special webinar. I can see a couple of attendees are starting to roll in now, but we'll give attendees just 2 more minutes before we actually go live. Looking forward to an interesting topic. I know a lot of people have been clamoring for information, and the problem right now is that there's so much information, and sorting through the weeds of what's up to date, what's current is difficult, and as well looking to find information on how to actually not only take advantage of the tax benefits, which we'll be talking about today, but actually how to survive and thrive is an important aspect that we wanted to touch on, which is why we brought in special guests today. And our special guest is, I'll do a formal introduction when we actually go live, but he's a world-renowned speaker, speaks at over 40 events a year, has written best-selling books, most recently a book called Blindsided, and I don't think we could be anything but blindsided by what's going on right now, and is really truly an expert on disruptive innovation, and has foreseen some of the disruptions that have taken place through technology, and can give us some tips on how to actually thrive through this technology, or thrive through this disruption, I should say. So we're at 12:30 now. So I think it's probably fair for us to start. So thank you, those of you who've joined in. I know that right now, time is difficult to manage. A lot of people are saying, oh, people have more free time. I can speak for myself, trying to continue to do work with kids at home. I don't find I have more time. It's almost tougher to juggle and manage time efficiently. But we're going through some rapidly changing times with rapidly evolving information. And so we want to bring you guys some helpful resources and some information and give you the places to go to stay up to date on what's happening and what's going on, from the government support standpoint, but also give you guys some tips and some tools on how to thrive amid COVID-19. Obviously, a lot of us have been forced into working from home, and what does that look like and how do you take advantage of it? A lot of businesses have rapidly evolved and changed because they had to, and we've got a special guest with us who is an expert on disruptive innovation. So I'm thankful that Jim could join us today. And I'll try and keep my section as short as possible because I know we really want to hear from Jim. But I do want to fly through some core areas that are really important. So I want to talk about the Canadian economic response. I'll just mention it briefly. We can talk about it more in the Q&A at the end of the program. I also want to share with you our journey through the cloud, because we are one of the firms that were on the leading edge of cloud technology and have been able to take advantage of all this technology. And that positioned us to be able to shut down our office without having a very difficult transition to working from home. So I want to share with you our journey and where we are today and what are the tools that have got us to that point. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jim, who's going to talk to you more about thriving through disruption, including my emails. So I should close those out. So without further ado, a little background about who we are. I think many of you know that we're an accounting firm that specializes in independent consultants. We are a cloud accounting firm, which means we leverage all this amazing technology that is delivered through the internet, which is what enables us to work from home. We've been recognized as the top 50 cloud accountants for 5 years in a row, actually. And we have really been on this journey for a long time. I'd say going back as far as 1999 when we first started working in the cloud. So we have a lot of information to share on how to really work effectively remotely. So I'm hoping that that'll be useful for some of you who are just starting to make that transition. I also want to talk about the Canadian economic response because we're getting a lot of emails, a lot of questions about what's going on here. There's been some programs that have been put out in support for individuals and families. They're increasing the Canadian child benefit by $300 per child. There's a special goods and service tax credit of $400 for individuals and $600 for couples. It is income dependent, so more information on that later. They're also giving us extra time to file tax returns. I think a lot of people are aware of this. It's now to June 1st. We have put up some information on our website, a blog post with all the details, and we'll share with you again how to find that. There's mortgage support for deferring your mortgage. You really got to talk to your bank about that. There's the new Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. This is the big one that everyone's asking about. They want to know whether they are going to, whether they should apply for that or apply for wage subsidies. So we'll happy to answer questions about that in the Q&A. And the other thing that a lot of people aren't talking about is reduced minimum withdrawals for RIFs. So if you're on a RIF, they've reduced the minimum withdrawal by 25%. And then there's also some practical services available for people who need deliveries and personal outreach as well. From the business standpoint, they're extending the work sharing program, and they've got the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy. One of the things that's important to talk about the wage subsidy, there are actually two programs. There's the 10% program, which you do not have to have a loss for at all in order to qualify. But if you have more than 18 employees, you're not eligible. And then there's the 75% wage subsidy, which you must demonstrate a 30% loss year over year, month over month. So April compared to April of last year, March compared to March of last year. They did mention in the press conference with Minister Morneau that there is going to be more information. They're trying to create legislation in a week that normally takes a year. So there's lots of details to be worked out, and we're still waiting for that legislation on the 75% wage subsidy. So we don't have all the answers, but they're saying there will be some alternative ways of measuring that 30% loss for things like startups and other businesses where you might have a 30% loss, but it might not be month over month. They haven't shared any details with that. One of the important things to know and understand is for our clients, if you're looking to do a wage subsidy with non-arm's length individuals, i.e. family members, you cannot do a wage subsidy if these people did not have wages in the previous year. And it will be based on a proration of the wages that they had in the previous year. So we're going, and again, there's not very much information on this. We're going based on the assumption annual salary divided by 52 weeks to get that wage subsidy amount. There's also access to credit programs. There's the Business Credit Availability Program, as well as the Canadian Emergency Business Account. So a couple of new programs that are available. One is being done through your traditional banks, and you need to reach out to them. It will be effective and available on April the 6th. And the other one is through BDC. The one through the banks is the one with the potential 10% forgiveness. Again, we don't have any details yet on what you need to do to qualify for that $10,000 forgiveness. I personally suspect it's going to be something similar to that 30% criteria. But again, we don't have the information on that yet. And then again, with the businesses, also more time to pay income taxes and deferral of sales taxes and HST. And again, we've got a blog post with all the details about that. So if people have more questions, and I'm sure they are going to, I'll encourage you to save those for the chat afterwards, because I really want to get to Jim and let him share his tools and strategies for thriving through this disruption. But before we do, I want to share a little bit about our journey. And our journey actually started, probably close to 20 years ago, if not more. And it really started around my father sitting on his beach in Mexico back in the day when the only real communication that we could get down in Mexico was a fax. And at the time, getting a fax, my dad was like, "This is amazing. I could run my business from Mexico." And he had this dream of being able to work wherever he was in the world, anytime that he wanted, where he wanted, when he wanted, how he wanted. And he believed that technology was going to be the answer to doing that. And so we started on this journey building out what many of you may remember as DocMan, or Easy as ABC, which was our online bookkeeping and accounting application that we served for clients before. This was pre-QBO, pre-Wave, pre-Zero, pre-any of the other technologies. We did eventually get leapfrogged by those same technologies, but my dad really had this vision for a brighter tomorrow that unrelinquished us from having to be sitting at a desk. And it really stemmed out of his desire to be sitting on a beach in Puerto Vallarta and running and managing his business from the place he loves most. And I think that my dad has really achieved that business. We were able to go remotely a week before mandatory closures very seamlessly and very effectively. but there were some bumps along the road. And those bumps took place years ago, when we started this journey. I think the first real bump that we hit was when we wanted to go paperless and create a digital working paper file, which meant things like dual monitors and those types of things. And I remember Oksana, which many of our clients will know and love, getting upset with me for trying to put two monitors on her desk. She's like, I don't have space for two of these on my desk. Where am I going to put my paper? And trying to understand those transitions and those changes was very difficult for her. And now if I were to dare take away that second monitor, I think she'd cut a limb off. But these are the types of growing pains that you're going to be going through as you're transitioning to working remotely. You need to be able to have those paper documents in electronic forms. And how are you digitizing that information? And then for us, the next step was replacing our practice management software, which is this DocMan system that we built. We quickly realized that we'd been leapfrogged by better technologies, and with our own practice management software that we built, it was great. It was customized to us, but making changes was really difficult and time consuming. We had to bring in developers. And so making this transition to the idea of using pre-existing tools and technology and not reinventing the world was a big shift and a difficult decision, particularly for my father, who had invested a large amount of money into building this technology. For him to be like, I've got to drop all this technology and this infrastructure and the system that I built to jump onto new technology that has leapfrogged me and that is faster, more adaptable, is a difficult decision. And many of you might be going through that decision now with legacy systems and having to make the transition. Where do you cut the line and say, you know what, this system is no good, it's not working for us, it's time to shift to another one? Are those difficult conversations that you're going to have, but they're important, and now is the time to be having them. The next big bump in the road for us was moving to Citrix. We'd built a lot of, we were paperless now. We had a practice management that was in the cloud that we could access from anywhere in the world, but all of our accounting software, a lot of the legacy desktop applications that we needed to actually run our practice weren't available on the web. They just weren't cloud-based. So we needed a solution that would allow us to do that. And there were, solutions like Go to My PC back then, which is not terribly secure. There's Windows RDP, there's Citrix Terminal Services. We ended up settling on Citrix Terminal Services. And it has been a godsend because unfortunately we still have software today that is not cloud-based that we need to use to run our business. And Citrix allows us to do that very effectively. Though we were at the time running all of that on big, heavy servers that we ran and managed ourselves. We ultimately had a server crash that cost us tens of thousands of dollars and was the impetus for us to be like, okay, we don't want to own any hardware whatsoever at all. And so we went to virtual servers. We use a company called Xbase based here in Canada, who provides us virtual servers and desktop support, virtual desktop support. Great company, can't rave enough about what an amazing job they've done for us, and what a great job they have done in virtualizing us and providing the support that we need for managing all our users when they encounter the inevitable issues that they will face. And then the last bit was replacing our phone system. And thank God we had done that. And we went through a lot of back and forth between my stepmother and myself about replacing our legacy system. Again, we had invested a large money in this phone system, and the idea of transitioning to a VoIP phone system that may not be reliable was stressful. Ultimately, we did it. And again, thank God we did, because otherwise, without the phone systems and people able to take and receive phone calls at home, it would have been very difficult for us to make that transition. But thankfully, as I mentioned earlier, we have made that transition, and technology has been a key part of that. I think the most important thing when you're moving to a remote office is communication. So I wanted to share with you the app stacks that we're using to manage that. The phone system we're using is Active PBX. There's a number of choices out there. We chose that one because it integrates with our CRM that we use. Though phone, as everyone knows in this day and age, is not sufficient. We do also rely on instant messaging through Microsoft Teams. And of course, you can't get away from email. We are an Office 365 office, so we're using Outlook. Then things like Calendly for allowing clients to quickly and easily book meetings. And then the big one, which everyone is now talking about, but we've been doing for years, is Zoom to enable these virtual meetings and create that collaboration, which is so important. Having that ability to work and network as a team. We can get our entire team, and we've done that. We've done Fridays, which Rachel, who's monitoring some of the Q&A, proposed, which is just an opportunity for all the team to get together, hang out, and have a drink together. And as she said, put on some makeup and do your hair and get yourself purdy for one day of the week. And so having this ability to communicate and collaborate in person without being in person is such an important tool for going virtual. Then we use ShareFile for sharing and collaborating information. Sending information via email is problematic in so many different ways. It's not secure. People may go to junk or spam. So we use ShareFile, as many of our clients know, as a way of sharing and communication back and forth. Now with the changes, the government has allowed digital signatures, but we've been using that for over a year now with Right Signature, so that clients don't have to physically come in our office and sign. Then you've got things like WordPress, so we can have a website where we can share all this information and all these changes. And then Infusionsoft, which is our CRM, our practice management, our everything. Anyone who's ever heard me talk before knows I love this product. It's doing so much for us, but obviously it's frontline communication for newsletters, for email blasts and all of that information, as well as automated emails. And then from a productivity standpoint and financial standpoint, we're using tools, Office 365, as I mentioned, we're using for Word, Excel, all those traditional documents which you need to run your office, which now can be thankfully accessed through the cloud, and tools like Zapier to integrate different pieces of cloud-based technology that don't natively work together. And then Citrix Zen Server, which I talked about earlier, which allows us to have all of our desktop applications that aren't already in the cloud available. And then from a financial standpoint, for our own businesses, we're running QBO, Xero, Receipt Bank, WagePoint, and T-Sheets to be able to do all of this electronically. And I'm not going to talk about that at all because I pitched that enough in all the webinars that we do for our clients on the great benefits of doing your bookkeeping virtually. But now is more important than ever because we're not taking physical documents. Well, we have one client who was still doing a ledger, like a physical ledger, and he gets permission because he's in his 80s. But those of you who are my age or even my dad's age or somewhere in between, you can be leveraging this technology to be able to get that information to us seamlessly and effectively without having any downtime or any interruption in the accounting process whatsoever. I ran through that as quick as I could because I really wanted to get to our special guest. Jim has been a friend of mine for years, a mentor, a coach. We are very, very fortunate to have him here. I've seen him speak on disruptive innovation at Idea City several times. And he was, got, I think, standing ovations, great response. People love his content. And he's got some great books out there. One of them, the most recent, Blindsided, which is talking about disruption and innovation. And I think there couldn't be a more timely topic than talking about disruption. So Jim, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to stop the share so you can take over if you'd like.
Fantastic. So I'm so excited to be here. Can people see the screen?
We can see the virus.
The virus. So this tiny virus of 0.2 microns is creating huge disruption in our world. So I'm excited to be here, and we're going to have fun today with this seminar, and happy to take any questions afterwards. Just want to have a shout out to Rachel, who set this all up, to thank her. So we're going to be talking about surviving and pivoting during this era of coronavirus. And if anybody wants to email me after the seminar, it's jim@jimharris.com. If anyone's on LinkedIn, by all means, send me a connection request. Mention the seminar here. and your network will instantly grow by 27 million people. And if anybody's tweeting today, it's just at Jim Harris. So this is a cliff in Brazil that's really popular with the Instagram generation. It takes about an hour to hike up to this peak, and people do these crazy things. Like, this guy's ripped. I wouldn't do this. She is ripped. This guy apparently does yoga. This really gets to me. Really, it's all about framing. How I see the world determines how I behave, and how I behave determines the results I get. If I change the frame, it can change everything. And so I used to represent a guy called Stephen Covey in Canada, who wrote the 7 Habits. And Stephen used to say, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. So if I look at this crisis we're facing as horrific, then I can't see any opportunity. If I change the frame on it, it may change the opportunity that I see. So here's our agenda for my brief segment, framing. The financial impact, is this a threat or an opportunity? A little bit about the science, and then some strategies to thrive. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average is down roughly 30%, or has wiped out $10 trillion of value. Globally, it's 20 trillion. This is a slide that's a couple of days older. If you were an investor in Air Canada, you've seen the value drop 75%. And it's not just for Air Canada, it's for all airlines around the world. Carnival Cruises, which had a couple of cruises quarantined, has fallen 85% in the last 2 months. So that's the financial, doom and gloom and crisis. But there's this amazing saying that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So what has happened? Well, we're going to see interest rates basically go down to zero from the, the US Fed and, Canadian Central Bank. But what that means actually is we have to see opportunity in this crisis. This is an amazing time to renew your mortgage if your mortgage is at or very near the end of the term. I explored my mortgage, and the break fee on the mortgage was about $8,000 to get out of my current one, but I ended up being able to get a new one at 2.54%. Now, just to put it into perspective, the lowest rate, I was talking to a mortgage broker, the lowest rate in the last 40 years is 2.44%. So we're going to save about $100,000 in interest over the period of this mortgage. So make lemonade out of lemon. So why are things never going to go back to the way they were before? Well, Zoom, in December of 2019, Zoom had about 10,000 daily users. Now in March, it has 200 million daily users. So things will never go back to the way they were before. Companies used to have a policy to prohibit people from working from home. But when we do finally get back, and I just want to suggest this is going to be longer than most people think. It's going to be July, August before we get back to meeting in person. Companies that had a policy of prohibiting people from working from home are going to allow them. So you may end up being able to work 1, 2, 2.5 days from home. Zoom, by the way, has experienced explosive growth in its stock valuation, needless to say. Do you know that in North America, we spend 5 work weeks a year commuting on average? That's more than 200 hours a year. And what would you do with 5 more weeks if you were given it back? Now, I love Andrew's point earlier that, we have kids running around at home, so maybe we're not getting all that time back, but we're never going to see the world go back to the way it was. Telehealth. In China, 50% of all visits to hospitals to see, or 50% of all visits to seek medical advice during this corona outbreak in China were by remote telemedicine. In fact, before this crisis, the run rate in China was 300 million virtual visits a year. And this crisis is going to force health authorities to allow telemedicine, because you just don't want to go into the hospital because first of all, the hospitals aren't going to be able to cope with you. So we're going to see a huge boom in telemedicine. And for contractors, think about the implications of all these. So if you have health clients, it's helping them move to telehealth. Currency is a super spreader of disease, of the virus. So we're going to see a huge shift to digital currencies. Square is having a huge uptake. Bitcoin, it's still in its infancy, but we're going to have a shift to digital currencies, whether that's using PayPal or others, as opposed to money or even credit cards. We're going to see a huge uptick in 3D printing. So in Italy, they had a problem with ventilators. They were missing some parts. And in this crisis, it was a huge problem. So people ended up 3D printing the parts they needed to enable those ventilators to work. So we're going to see a huge uptick in the adoption of 3D printing. This is a robotics line for Tesla in Fremont, California. And, if all of a sudden your manufacturing is ground to a halt because people can't congregate, this will drive the uptick of robotics. So let's look a little bit at the virus itself. This is Johns Hopkins website that collates all the data. More than 1 million cases. That milestone was broken yesterday. Let's look at how many new cases. This is all the other countries. This is the US, which has refused to have a nationwide lockdown. It's now, this is a day old chart. It's now running at 30,000 new cases a day for the US. What people don't understand is exponential growth. So if we go back to March 4th, there were 118 cases in the US. And you can see just less than 1 month later, we're going to break 250,000 today. So the reason for the lockdown is the exponential growth of the transmission of this disease. And clearly, Mr. Trump hasn't got that yet. Part of the problem is the disease has an incubation period of up to 14 days. So you could have the disease, not know it, and if you were going to large gatherings, you could spread it to all sorts of people. In fact, there was one person in South Korea who spread it to 1,160 people. She was responsible. This graph is really important. This is the experience in the province that Wuhan is in. And you can see on January 23, they went into complete lockdown. That's the red line above the gray bar there. The gray bars are the actual cases, but we don't know that until hindsight. The yellow bars, or yellowy orange bars, are the perceived cases, the confirmed cases that we get. Or think about it this way. The gray bars are you have caught the virus, but it's in its incubation period and you don't have any symptoms yet. The yellow bars are once you have symptoms and are confirmed. And so you'll notice from pretty much the day after the lockdown, there was an increase, but then the numbers began falling. But perceptually, for the public, we didn't see a decline for 10 or 12 days after the lockdown. So it's only after lockdown that we are going to experience or see a decline in cases. So this is the point at which we perceive, the red line here, we perceive lockdown. And really, no doubt you'll have seen this. This is all about flattening the curve. The yellow area here is runaway with no mitigation strategies. The horizontal line is the capacity of our healthcare system, and the purple is the flattening the curve. We still end up with people getting sick, but the healthcare system can cope with it. And when we saw in Italy, the yellow, the death rate goes up by up to 4 or 5 times higher because all of a sudden you don't have enough ventilators. Also, think about the capacity of the healthcare system, that doctors and nurses get sick and they die. So the healthcare system, we have to keep the healthcare system itself healthy. That's why flattening the curve is so important. And in Canada, we only have 3,200 ICU beds and 5,000 ventilators. So, and in certain areas in the GTA, we're already exceeding capacity. The worst case scenario for the US for a total runaway would be 70 to 150 million total cases and 1 million deaths. So we're not going to see that because lockdowns are happening in states all over the place, but the US certainly has been slow to respond. This is really a tale of two cities. Back in 1918, Philadelphia decided to go ahead and have a parade to support the war effort, whereas St. Louis went to shutdown. And the dark solid line is Philadelphia. You can see the number of cases absolutely spiked, whereas in St. Louis, it was flat. And this is really what flattening the curve is all about. So this is Philadelphia's parade that was just a beautiful way to spread the disease to everyone in the city. And so if you think about all the US spring breakers congregating on the beaches of Florida and Texas, I watched some of them on the news saying, well, I'm healthy. You know, I'm 22. I have a good immune system. Yeah, that's not the point. The point is you're going to kill granny when you go home, and you're going to take coronavirus to every state in the US. Spring break would have been the absolute perfect way to spread it to every town in the US. So as I mentioned, this case number 31, this woman was single-handedly responsible for an explosion in cases in South Korea. And then, of course, all the 1,160 people she infected were infecting others. So 80% of the cases are mild, only 14% severe and 5% critical. But those critical ones and the severe ones are the ones that need the medical assistance, and that's what overwhelms the system. So let's pivot to innovation itself. If you stop and ask people, you know, on the street, what's innovative, typically you'll get this answer: the iPhone is innovative. It's actually not. It was in 07, but people will, 75% of the answers will be about a product. But product is only one part of an ecosystem of value. And while it gets 75% of the mind share in on the street interviews or surveys, it also gets 75% of the focus in companies around innovation, but it only yields 10% of the value. 90% of the value is up here in business model innovation, process innovation, policy innovation, and service innovation, the other 4 areas. So what do I mean by that? Let's look at business model innovation first. So think about this. Do you know that Uber is worth more than every taxi cab company in North America added together? And so while the taxi cab industry owns billions of dollars of assets in the form of cars, Uber doesn't own a single vehicle. So this shows a couple things. Number one, apps are a huge multiple of the valuation of your business. If you can somehow have an app that is widely adopted, that is a huge multiplier on your business valuation. Now, what is every taxi cab company doing in response? Well, do you know here in Toronto, Bex Cabs is developing for $250,000 their own app. And so is Diamond Taxi. Like, good for them. Now, I don't know about you, but the reason I got this smartphone was to download 19 Toronto taxi apps and key my data in with my fat thumbs to each one. Not like the taxi industry doesn't get it that the game has changed. I will never download any one of these 19 Toronto taxi apps, because I don't just work in Toronto. I work in Shenzhen. I work in Stockholm, in London. So am I going to go download 19,000 global taxi, cab company apps? I don't think so. The cab industry, though, if it developed a single app that spanned the entire world, I would download that. But that would require a different level of thinking for taxi cab company owners. They need to think cooperatively. Now, the advantage for the industry is they'd share only 1/19,000th of the development costs. So when you're focused on your business model, if we can deliver people from point A to point B using an app, could we deliver burgers? Absolutely. Think about Uber Eats. It did $6 billion of business last year. That is working to twist my business model as opposed to focused on my product. Now, what Uber has done during this crisis is brilliant. They have waived the fees for Uber Eats. So one, that means they're going to gain market share relative to in-person dining in restaurants during this crisis. It means they ingratiate themselves to their customers, and they pick up new customers who've never tried it before, but who during this time when they can't go out to restaurants still want their favorite restaurant's food. So waiving the fees is making lemonade out of lemon. So this is also about supporting their ecosystem. A lot of restaurants are going to fail during this period because they moved to zero revenue. But every restaurant that has appified via Uber Eats is going to do better. Now, they may not be thriving, but they'll get by because Uber Eats will throw them a lifeline. So companies that have made the digital transformation are going to do well during this. If I can do Uber liquor, or if I can do people, if I can do burgers, how about Uber liquor? How about Uber weed? This is focusing on twisting at the business model level. What about process innovation? Well, process innovation would be how do we enable our customers to get everything they need digitally? That would be apps, that we're talking about. I want to switch to a bit of personal. When we are threatened, we will engage in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So fight or flight we know about. Freeze is we're just paralyzed, and fawn is I'm going to wait for the government to solve all my problems. When we're in any one of these four states emotionally, we cannot respond creatively, innovatively to the challenge we face. So it's important that we move beyond these to be creative. Personally, some people are experiencing more stress and anxiety than they ever have before. And it's important to stay calm personally. So this is Dean Ornish's book on moving more. So physical activity, stress less, meditation, love, be connected to people, and we can do that remotely with Zoom, and eat and sleep well. These four things make more difference to our health personally than anything else. And now is a time we need to practice that. So again, my email, jim@jimharris.com. If this is a magazine of a cover story I wrote, you're not going to believe this. They sent a professional photographer to my office to take 300 photos, and this is the one they picked. Like,
You work on Game of Thrones?
Yeah, like I could maybe get a part role on there. Like, do I A, look sinister, B, evil, or C, demonic?
You just need some blue eyes and you could be a White Walker.
A White Walker it will be. So, like, I think my career as a professional model is over before it began. But if you email me at jim@jimharris.com after this seminar, we will send you a
Coronavirus?
Yeah, we'll send you a coronavirus. No, we'll send you a 200 or 2,000 word digital copy of this article. So it's been great to be here. I want to thank Rachel again for setting this all up, and happy to go to questions. So I'll stop sharing my screen and we can go back to the chat, and happy to answer any questions. I'll turn it back over to you, Andrew.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. It's an honor and a privilege to actually do a speaking gig with you in this new age. I don't think I would normally get that opportunity because you're usually on much bigger stages than myself. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. It really is an innovative time, an opportunity where we're being forced to disrupt the way that we work and act every day, from everything from education for our children, to how we work out and exercise, to how we run our practices, to the way people think about businesses, and coming up with new ideas to generate improved cash flow during these difficult times, to come up with new business models to help your business thrive through this. And there are some businesses, like we look at Zoom, obviously thriving through this business model. The grocery store is thriving through this model. There is an opportunity to turn this crisis into something positive. You look at the stock markets, and there is going to be an opportunity here. I don't know if we're there yet. I've been on a number of webinars in the last couple of weeks talking about the stock market and what's happening there. And the greatest visualization I saw was this picture of this valley with a river in between. And it basically just saying we're at the bottom of this valley right now, and we are just about to cross a major hurdle. But we've got to get over that river first. And once we get over that river, it's all uphill from there. So bear with me a second. I've just lost my video. I think my camera died. So let me get
Okay,
that.
while you're working on that, I'll just come back for a second here. One of the very important things is going to be cash flow or liquidity. So, any revenues that you can get in that you're owed is great, and any deferrals you can make is great. So, for instance, with the banks, you can defer your mortgage payments for up to 6 months. Now, you'll still end up paying that back, but it's in essence giving you relief during the period. So think about cash flow very carefully during this time. We have also, in my company, I speak at a lot of conferences and seminars all around the world, and I've seen that business plummet by 100%. So it was 70% of my revenue. So we knew that our revenue was going to go down by 70%. So we went to everyone who's here at the company, and this is another interesting strategy. We said, look, our revenue's going to go down by 70%. We didn't wait till we hit the wall. We told everyone right away. And what do you need to get by? Like, the minimum just to survive. And, some people said 0 because, my spouse still has his job. And, I had some side gigs, which are still good and blah, blah, blah. Okay, you could be at 0. Other people said I need $500 a month just to survive. And some people said I need 15 hours a week. So by involving everyone in that decision, or by consulting everyone, we ended up with nobody who was below what their minimum was to get by. And what that does is it increases the commitment to the company rather than coming out with an across the board policy. Everyone's going to be cut by X amount. Well, some people that's like that threatens them, and other people, they don't need it. So involving everyone, saying we're all in the same boat is a powerful tool for commitment and engagement and ultimately loyalty.
And I think one of the things that's amazing is the way people are standing up in the community, like even within your organization, the people saying, yeah, well, I only need this much, so I can take less than the guy beside me. The organizations who have stepped up to offer programs to support people. Infusionsoft, the company we work with, has put together a fund where people can get $500 towards helping them. It's not much, but it's, they're trying to do their parts. Organizations like Zoom offering their tool for free to educators. There's a number of people who have really stepped up to try and help people. I can tell you there's a lot of accountants spending hours and hours of work and research to try and provide information. I know my stepbrother, Drew, is working on a new job board to help people find actually all the jobs that are actually available right now. Because one of the big issues, people who may not understand the job board industry, usually you buy like a year's worth of services. And so you'll keep your job up there, whether or not you need someone right now, just because you paid for it. And so the problem we have right now is there's a lot of jobs on these job boards, but people aren't actively searching for people. So there's been a number of people that have worked together to come up with lists of real companies that are actually still hiring through this crisis. And Drew's putting together a job board to share that. 100% free. So it's going to be a free job board with only active jobs so that people can find the people who are really hiring right now during this crisis. I'll be sharing that link as well as the link to there's some Excel spreadsheets out there right now. I'll put those out to our Facebook group. For those who aren't in it already, our Facebook group is facebook.com/groups /the self-employed support network. And do encourage everyone to join that group and ask questions there. And of course, if you've got questions now, if you have questions about, ways that you can pivot your business model, if you've got questions about what are the issues with different programs that are being offered, what programs should you apply for, feel free to post questions here or post them into the Facebook group, and we'll be happy to go through them. Go ahead, Jim.
So the example of Zoom allowing children to use it for their education needs is a great example of taking advantage of this crisis, because the kids will learn how to use Zoom and then they'll take it home and teach their parents. Like McDonald's knows how to get to families. It's through the kids, right? You advertise. So this is really, so it's being of service to the community, to the education system, but it's also good business. So this notion of service in this crisis, I said to Andrew, how can I help you? And come on with this seminar. And I'll be happy, Andrew, by the way, to do it again, maybe in 2 weeks' time, if Miss Rachel will organize it again.
Yes, because we did put this together fairly quickly and we didn't have time to get it out to everyone effectively. So we've got a number of people on the call, but I'm sure it would have been much more if they had time to set their schedules aside. And I think that this is great. And I do encourage everyone who's on this call to share Jim's name and contact information. Because as Jim mentioned, 70% of his revenue evaporated overnight. And he's pivoting, he's adapting, he's moving to webinars and online education and ways to provide support. But we need to support entrepreneurs like Jim as well. So please, if you know anyone who's looking for some help and some coaching on disruptive innovation, as well as social media, a big part of why we've grown our social media presence as large as we have is thanks to this man right here. So if you need help and you're looking for support in social media, please do reach out and connect with him. He knows his stuff. What are you up now on Twitter? Like 270,000 followers?
Yeah, just under 280,000.
280,000 followers on Twitter. And, you know, the Jim, for many of you who don't know, has got a background in politics, and there's no one who knows and understands social media better than the politicians. So this is the guy you want to learn that stuff from. A knowledgeable resource on so many different things, from blockchain and disruption and business management. And as well, your wife, Leanne, it's worth mentioning her as well. She's also a great resource on disruption and innovation and coaching through that transition. Do you want to share a bit about Leanne and what she does?
Sure. So when I was talking about the 4 other areas to focus on innovation as opposed to just product, Leanne works with companies around the world on their innovation systems. So this is an absolutely staggering stat. 88% of CEOs say that innovation is essential to their top line. I don't know what the other 12% were doing that day or thinking about, but only 22% of companies have an actual innovation system, formal systems. Like, that's ludicrous. Imagine that CEOs said this about sales. 88% of CEOs say sales are essential, but only 22% of companies have salespeople. Only 22% of companies have, CRM like Salesforce. Only 22% tie performance to compensation on a quarterly or annual basis. We'd say that was ludicrous, and yet that's what we're doing with innovation. There needs to be a formal process of innovation that people understand, they're trained in, they work collaboratively on in order to drive innovation. And the companies that have made the digital transformation, both internally and externally, internally working in teams with, Zoom, Slack, Trello, many of the programs that Andrew talked about from an accounting point of view. Those that have made the transition are going to thrive during this, and those that haven't are going to get crushed. So this is ultimately a great news story for contractors, because you work remotely and digitally all the time. So this shift will not be difficult for you. You've already made it years ago. So very interesting. But are there any questions, Andrew, from the gang?
Surprisingly, we haven't come up with any questions. I guess people are being a bit shy today. Either that, or you've been so thorough that we've answered all their amazing questions that they had. I'd love to hear from people too, what struggles that they're facing and what things that they're struggling with. I know that many of the talking with the NACCB, which is the National Association of Computer Consulting Businesses, they said that many of their clients are going to be enabling work from home, but not everyone is able to do that. And there were definitely, some organizations that, full stop, abrupt cancellations of projects. So I know a number of our clients who have been, dramatically affected by this. And it looks like we do have a Q&A coming up. What do you think of Zone to Win by Jeffrey Moore? It's about innovation. I'm not familiar with it. Have you heard of it, Jim?
No, I know Jeffrey Moore. The work I'm familiar with his is Crossing the Chasm, which is a great book. So since I know it, I'll refer to it. Here's the classic challenge of disruption. Say for a newspaper, newspapers were used to making $25,000 for a full page ad in the Toronto Star. And when Google came along and was offering pennies on digital for a penny or two, right? An ad you could get, as little as a penny per click. The newspapers were not interested in this tiny little bit of revenue. So they didn't put their toe in the water when it was small. They waited until Google makes more money than all newspapers in North America added together. So when there is this disruption, you need to get in early on the game. But the barrier to established companies getting in early is the margins, and the absolute dollars are very small to begin with. I'm just going to share my screen to show you that survey that I talked about. Do you see it?
Yep.
So the innovation process here at the top, innovation is essential, 88%, but only 22% have a formal system. Now, why is it important to have innovation process and training for every single person in your organization? That's because the best source of new innovative ideas are employees. In other words, the people who are making our business work. The second best source of ideas are partners, and the third are customers, finally consultants. So do you have mechanisms to engage and involve people in your innovation process? So it's not just employees, it's really stakeholders. So this is to answer your question when you asked about Leanne. This is the work that Leanne does. She works with companies all around the world around innovation. Back to you, Andrew. You're on mute still.
Yes. So learning tips and tricks for Zoom. Maybe we should share some of those. Don't forget to unmute yourself. Don't forget to have your cameras charged. You know, the one thing I always struggle with is I'm a huge fan of technology. So I've always got the latest gadgets and things for my home office, but I never remember to charge my batteries. My number one tip for everybody, charge your batteries. And I think, you know, one of the things, you know, I'm going to stop the live now.